What captivated her wasn't the way that he stood at the doorway, nor the fact that he was there invading her personal space. It was his eyes. Deep, dark pools of blue-grey, which drew her in, threatening to hold her head underneath hypothetical water and never let her go. She struggled to breathe, just by the sheer force of him standing there, smiling and looking at her. There was absolutely nothing ominous about him. He was tall and mature, seemed to be around her age, she guessed. He had shoulder-length, straight, dark, red-brown hair that he had tied loosely behind his head. His black shirt and black pants fit perfectly with his leather boots and knee-length black coat. His pale skin contrasted perfectly with his dark attire as he simply stood there, arms crossed, leaning against the doorway, a slight smile on his lips. Beauty encapsulated in one single human form. She must have stared at him for a few moments, but those few moments felt like an eternity, drawn into his presence like a moth to a flame. She knew it was impolite and to some insulting to stare, yet she couldn't look away. All her strength and willpower vanished. All she wanted to do was go towards him. She tried to go to him, but her legs wouldn't move. Her body wouldn't move. She was absolutely frozen in that single spot. He straightened from leaning on the doorway, expression of amusement never leaving his lips. Young ladies like yourself should always keep the door closed. You never know what could stalk you, he said softly, in an accent that hinted of Welsh, the words almost melting out of his mouth as if they would be too pained to be parted from him. She struggled to say anything, but words failed her. She could feel some sort of powerful force drawing her towards him, yet she had no idea what it could be. Who was this person? He looked familiar, yet she knew she had never seen him in all her life. She tried to speak again, to say something slightly intelligent, but nothing escaped her lips. She tried to do the polite thing and ask him inside, as that's what she desperately wanted. But not a sound came from her. She just stood there, staring into those beautiful eyes, into his beautiful face. Finally, he smiled, and nodding slightly, he excused himself and closed the door. Collapsing to the floor as if the force that he exuded had finally been released, she felt some strange energy course through her body. She feared him as she should. That strange man had been at her doorway watching her for some time and could have killed her in cold blood. No one would have missed her. She doubted that this place even featured on her navigational tool, yet she ached to see him again. Her entire being ached painfully to see him again. Just a glimpse in the distance would suffice, and She knew she needed to be near him. Towel drying her hair, she realized that she was actually hungrier than she thought, and quickly threw some light makeup on her face to make her, as she deemed herself, more presentable. The t-shirt and jeans that she had found fit snugly, and she wondered how Rose could have guessed her size. After all, she was a more voluptuous woman than she would have wanted herself to be. She walked towards the dining room with her phone in hand in case she needed some entertainment, and went to find Rose. She secretly hoped that she would be alone, as she didn't want company at that moment, habitually preferring to be alone. She tentatively poked her head inside the dining room and saw that it was empty, and smiling in relief, listening for noise again, she tried to pinpoint Rose's location. Following the soft noise in the house, she followed Rose into the kitchen, checking on pots and oven contents. "Hi, Rose. Is this a bad time?" "Oh, no, my dear, please make yourself at home. There's a variety of wines that I could open for us. Take your pick." "Oh, no, thank you. I don't drink. I would have some tea, though, if you have any available." "Oh, my, what a sweet girl you are. Sure. What type of tea would you like?" "Oh, anything, please. I'm really not a fussy type of person." "And what would you wish to eat?" "Oh, once again, anything. Well, as long as it's not fish. I had a bad experience once, and it's haunted me ever since. Is there something I could help you with?" Rose laughed heartily and shook a finger at Sian. "Now you go and you make yourself comfortable in the dining room. I'll be out before you know it." Sian found a secluded spot in the dining room and started playing games on her phone. She should contact her family, she thought, in case they thought a wild animal, or even worse, a wild human, might have mauled her. She heard footsteps on the carpet walking towards her, and a teapot was set on the table. She could smell the citrus aroma of orange tea, another one of her favorites. "Oh, thank you so much, Rose," she said softly, without looking up, in a bid to close the active applications on her phone. "You must be psychic, knowing that I absolutely adore that type of tea." Looking up, smiling, expecting to see Rose, she froze in mid-sentence and mid-action when she saw his face towering over her. "You're welcome, young lady," he said, in his voice that threatened to make her forget who she was. She shook her head in an attempt to shake her thoughts and wits back to normality, only making him laugh and her blush with embarrassment. "Would you mind if I joined you for dinner?" No, I don't mind at all," she almost blurted out, and managed to avert her gaze. "I mean, I wouldn't want to be rude in chasing you out of here." He sat down and continued to look at her. She sipped her tea, burning herself in the process out of sheer nervousness, and almost swore when a trickle of tea escaped from her mouth and ran down her chin. Calmly, he leaned forward, and with the handkerchief, daubed the drop. She couldn't think of what to say, utter embarrassment clouding her mind, so she looked up at him. He was closer to her than she expected, and, unmoving, looked deeply into her eyes, almost as if he was trying to read her soul. At that moment, Rose stepped in, breaking her trance, and carried 2 hot bowls of pasta, and she set them on the table and winked at Sian. "My dear girl, you do make friends rather quickly. Now what do you make of her, Prince Pristine?" He looked at Sian, playfully curious. "I haven't been able to figure her out yet, but I'm sure she'll start telling me about herself soon enough," he said, the soft words gliding out of his mouth. Rose blushed in excitement and made up a poor excuse to leave. Taking another sip of her tea without dribbling this time, Sian felt a bit more courageous and looked at him directly. Even as she did, her heart felt as though it wanted to pound through her chest wall. "So, you're a prince?" she inquired unbelievingly. I've been asking Rose to stop calling me that since she arrived in this place, but she insists and I entertain her. Please call me Iago." "Iago?" she pondered. Where do you come from, if not around here?" "I'm from a small place called Knighton in Wales. I left because I was searching for something, a very peculiar book, which I happened to locate in this town." "Really? You travelled all this way for a book?" "Well, it's no ordinary book. I wish to take it back to Wales with me, but the town council wishes to keep it, so I'll be staying until I can convince them otherwise." How long have you been trying to convince them?" "Let's just say it has taken some time in the past, and I'm sure it will take up much of my time in the future. Now, that's enough about me. I'm more interested in you. Where are you from?" She looked down, trying so hard to remember, also trying to decide how much of herself she should tell him. After all, she didn't really know him at all. Finally, she decided to tell him all she knew, and maybe he could help her realize what happened to her. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure where I'm from or what I'm doing here. All I remember is that I've been driving on this road for what appears to be an eternity, and out of sheer luck, I saw buildings on the horizon. I drove towards them, and I met Rose. I was thinking of phoning someone to see if they could refresh my memory. That won't be possible, I'm afraid." She looked at him, defeat in her eyes, which made him move closer towards her. "No reception," he whispered. Her face released some tension, and he stroked her face slowly with the back of his hand. She closed her eyes, and a warm shiver coursed through her body. "You'd better get some rest. Tomorrow, Rose will help you explore the village." "Must you go?" "I'm afraid so, young lady." "Sian," she said. "My name is Sian James." "The honor of meeting you is entirely mine, Sian James." She gasped sharply as he lifted her hand and kissed it gently. Then he was gone. She looked at the empty doorway long after he had gone, appetite forgotten. All she knew was that she desperately wanted to see him again. Rose ended and stood with her hands on her hips and a smile on her lips for some time before gently clearing her throat to get Sian's attention. "I thought that you were hungry. Don't tell me that a little bit of tea broke that hunger bug of yours." She sat opposite Sian, shining eyes and smiling face, She didn't know why, but Sian felt that she could trust this woman sitting in front of her, which was quite different to what she was used to. What she knew, the little of what she could remember, was that the implicit code was always trust no one, as you'll be severely hurt if you do. But something just seemed different about Rose. She seemed openly honest, a rare quality in someone in that day and age. Rose, I'm going to ask you something, and please promise me that you won't laugh. Believe me, I already feel like an idiot thinking about this. Rose straightened up in the chair and looked as professional as she could muster, unable to wipe the smile off her cherry-coloured lips. Fire away, my dear. I'm all ears and feelers, she smiled. There's something strange about the prince. I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean, I don't sense evil in him. It's just, I don't know. I'm struggling to explain it. Sian looked at Rose in case offense was taken. The last thing she wanted to do was cause offense and be thrown out in the middle of the night. No need to explain, Rose offered, serious look on her face. No, please, I need to, Sian said desperately. When he looks at me, it feels as though I can't breathe, I can't move, that everything stops existing. It's just the two of us on this planet. Rose looked at Sian with no emotion at first, but then burst out laughing. You poor girl, Rose blurted. You're in love. Sian felt like an idiot. I really don't think so, Rose, she said. And do you know what the most amazing thing is? That he's in love with you too. Rose couldn't help herself. She jumped up and started dancing in the middle of the room. Sian blushed and felt even more stupid than before. She got up and held Rose by the shoulders to stop her movement. Rose, that is simply not possible. Love does not exist. Besides that, I've just met this man. And besides that, he's a prince, for goodness sake. And besides that, I think at my age I would know what it would feel like to be in love. Would you really? Rose inquired, smile still on her face. Yes, I said. And what I can tell you about love is that it does not exist, Rose. It's a chemical imbalance in one's brain which tends to turn people psychotic. If you really believe that, it means that you've been hurt quite badly in the past. Well, yes, but that's not the point. The point is that it's true. Sian deliberated, rather unconvincingly. I remember feeling that way about my dear Albert, Rose dreamed, disregarding Sian's argument. Our eyes met at a ball one evening, and the rest is history, they say. We were married a month, and stayed blissfully married until the Lord took him 40 years later. She turned to Sian, her brown eyes glistening, powder blue eyeshadow thickly applied to her eyelids. If that was a state of psychosis, my dear, then I would happily live the rest of my days in a straitjacket. Oh, Rose, I'm so sorry, Sian started, but she had nothing else to say. In her mind, the damage had already been done. She sat on a nearby chair and buried her head in her hands. I have never felt like this about anyone, and frankly it's scaring me. I don't know what to make of it or how to let it go. Rose, I'm not even sure I want to let it go. I just don't know what to do. Rose put a hand on Sian's shoulder. My dear, no need to feel like a bunch of potatoes on a haystack. I've known him for many years, Sian, and believe me when I say that the prince is not always impressed. He drives a hard bargain 100% of the time, and for that, most of the other people in this town don't really like him. He's firm, but fair, kind, and honest, and proudly different to everyone else. For him to see something in you says to me that there's something inside of you that's special, even if you don't see it. Trust me, my dear. Embrace these feelings and thoughts. He needs you more than you will ever realize. Lying in her bed that night, she could not stop thinking about Rose's words. How could he need her? He was a prince and she was a coward. She landed up in this place probably because she had been running from something, and that fact wouldn't have surprised her in a million years. Her in a nutshell, constantly running, constantly fearful, constantly weak. She closed her eyes and thought of him, his scent, his presence. Everything about him drew her in. His long hair tied behind his head, his nose and jaw sharp and precise, his firm torso as straight as a wall, his hands as soft as silk, and his eyes. His blue, grey, beautiful eyes, constantly beckoning her to join him. He appeared so regal, and she couldn't believe that she had missed it before. He exuded confidence, as the royalty usually do. She closed her eyes, thinking about him again, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, amused look on his face, and those eyes. She felt he not only looked at her, but through her, and that was the most unsettling of all. Feeling his hand stroke her cheek, she eventually fell asleep.